Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counter Clipping Show number 137 for August 21st, 2023. I've remembered to change the Discord link in the video ticker, so check that out if you have not joined the Ardwulf Lair Discord community already. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, and I'll remind you that if you haven't done so yet, please thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. If you want to do more to support the channel, there's links to do that in the video description as well. So we are drinking once again. We're drinking the Ardbeg Wee Beastie. We're trying to get rid of it. But it's not so bad that I'm going to toss it down the drain. But it's it's a bit tiresome. And I don't have enough people coming over drinking scotch to get rid of it cooperatively. So we are manfully continuing to sip on it here on Counter Clipping Mondays. And as I've said before, it's not bad. It's just a little one-dimensional. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Our topic this evening, and I feel slightly bad because I didn't give Mark a heads up on this. But our topic tonight is Mark Herman games. And we have a selection of 21 of Mark's notable games. We didn't have to leave a whole lot out, as you can imagine, but much of that is condensed, and I'll talk about that as we go through it. So I want to make sure that that we get a good range of coverage without necessarily covering like 15 different GDOH volumes. So since there's coughing, I guess I'll mention first of all, we've got two pieces of news. I'll do the COVID news, then I'll do the roll call, then I'll do the actual news. I got COVID again, so that's great. Symptoms have been mild, but I've had to stay away from the game and the office for the last 2 weeks. Which is an inconvenience to say the least. So those of us who were lucky enough to go to the San Diego HistCon East, the non-San Diego HistCon, I guess, it looks like a dynamite event. A whole bunch of eminent designers were there, including Mr. Herman himself. So lots of cool stuff looks like it happened. There were a couple of tours, as you can imagine. It was at the Naval War College Museum. It sounded really awesome. And it was just not, I cannot add another convention this year. Right. So anyway, I assume it was the new strain of COVID. Like I said, it's been mild. All of my symptoms have been mild. All of the 4 friggin' times that I've had it already, except for the last time, which was back in November when I caught it at Campus Expo. Then, it wasn't super bad. It was worse than, it has been any of the other 3 times. So we are clipping this evening a goodie that was sent to me. So you know who you are. Thank you very much. Netherlands East Indies. This is from a 2022 issue, I believe, of Strategy and Tactics magazine. I saw this on a table at Campus Expo. It's actually an interesting subject. And it is a fairly interesting looking game. It is a square grid map designed by Joe Miranda. I am clipping the 5/8 inch counters here tonight, and I will absolutely get the entire sheet done. So before we go any further, let's say hello to Bill Thornton. Welcome to the show. Brian Jarvis, Cardboard Conflicts, Chad Kennedy, Chet Bell, Daniel Brown, Daniel Silverthorne, David Zell, E4 Airman from sunny Dayton, Ohio. It's a nice part of the day today up here. Egret, Eric Goebel, Eric Schaefer, Half-Ass Gaming, John, nice to see you again. Holden Messerschmidt, the legend himself, Fucko, is here. Jason W., Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio, Joe Okabayashi, Joel, John Madison, Kyle Harris, Kyle Reese, Lee Grant, Marty Sample, Martin Spetz, Meandering Mike, Perfidious Albion, Ray Garby, Rob Moffat, Scott Bell, Sheriff Harry, Stacking Limit is here, The Grog Shed, Tim Greenhaw, Tim Zales, Vince Reed, William Aarons, William Bird, and Wolf Dog. So thanks everybody for coming out this evening, and I apologize to anybody that I may have missed because YouTube did not give me the information. So in any event, I guess let me talk about a couple of misadventures that occurred very briefly. We're not gonna detour too long about this. So yesterday, Sunday, I started off the day by going outside, sitting down on the back patio, and having immediately realized that I was sitting on a wasp. So I got stung by a wasp in the ass, and then I went in the house and went sat in front of the computer and went to put my headphones on, and the headphones, PC headphones, the headphones disintegrated underneath my fingers. And then I got the call that our GURPS game was canceled because the GM was not feeling well. He may have COVID as well. We'll see. So it was a not amazing day. The old headphones were, I want to say, a HyperX Cloud wireless. I will never go back to wired headphones because you end up turning around and they get janked by the cord and they end up on the floor and they break a million times. The new ones are these. They're a little boxier. These are the HyperX Cloud Alphas wireless. I think there's a wired version as well, but like I said, I'll never go back to wired headphones. The microphone quality's I don't know. I haven't tested it, and I don't need to, so we don't need to worry about microphone quality. While I was at it, I replaced my keyboard as well with a reasonably priced Logitech model. The previous keyboard was a Razer, and while it felt good to type on, it was very flaky. I would get phantom keystrokes pretty regularly. I am reasonably sure that that was the cause of the mysterious USB failures that I was experiencing because since changing the keyboard out, I have not experienced one. Now that could be coincidence. I don't know. It could happen during the show here tonight. So new keyboard, new headset. I did not replace my mouse because my mouse is doing fine. It is a Logitech G502 or something like that. It has plenty of buttons, but not too many buttons, if you know what I'm saying. So we are all set for Starfield early access, for which opens on the 31st, which is a Thursday. So pretty much right after the show with Dan, I'm going to start playing, and then whenever Brant calls me into the Armchair Dragoons 5th anniversary show, I'll hop out and go into that and probably play all night. And we'll see. Maybe not all night. We'll see. My ability to sit in a chair for extended periods of time is not what it used to be. So, if anybody wants to see me stream Starfield play on the video game channel, let me know. Either here in the chat tonight or by any of the various channels with which to get a hold of me. There's a link to the digital channel in the video description if you want to subscribe to it. I will probably play it very intensely for several days. That is my typical modus operandi with stuff like that. No, Compass is a go. That was last year that I got sick. So I am going to be at Compass Expo in November. So hope to see you there, John. So anyway, yeah, no, I haven't had like no. I mean, I've been staying in the house, right? So I don't think I gave it to anybody. So anyway, news-wise, we have. So that does mean I haven't been playing Last Blitzkrieg. So that's put the kibosh on our game for the last 2 weeks, unfortunately. So at the first week, it was like I was exposed, but I was not testing positive, and then the second week I was testing positive. So it's like great. But everything will be ducky again by November, which is the next event that I intend to go to. So Paperless Writer, thanks so much. Starfield, you can buy. So to be clear on this, you can buy it on Steam, but it is not playable until I think September 5th, unless you get the collector's edition or whatever it's called, which has early access, which starts on the 31st. So that's the deal on that. So you can also, if you're like an Xbox Game Pass subscriber, which I am not, I mean, it's not just Xbox games. You can get it for the PC too. Their subscription plan I found confusing, to say the least. So stacking limit, yeah, okay. Well, it sounds like I'm definitely going to be playing it. So if I'm going to be playing it, I might stream it too. We'll see what happens. But the more people that say they want to, they'll watch it, then the more people will, and that's likely to happen. The right place to do it is on Twitch, and then upload the videos to YouTube on the digital channel later. due to Twitch's changed terms of service, but I don't really want to deal with that either. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'll be playing it on whatever day it releases. So the news is the GMT update released on the 17th, which was just a couple of days ago. So let's start going through that. So as usual, I'm not going to read every word here. That would take the entire show. So I am um I am just going to kind of hit the highlights here. We're going to go through it together, and then I will direct you to the GMT webpage where you can read the thing in total if you want. Chet Bell, thanks very much. That's awesome. I hope Mark liked them. That would be great. I don't think you told me you were giving them to Mark, but maybe I was being thick and missed it. That's been known to happen. I am hearing Jeremy White's Pacific Chase was on tables at the SD HistCon East event. And while praise has not been universal, I have heard from several people or heard of several people saying that they liked it better than Atlantic Chase. So, Meandering Mike, if you buy the deluxe, whatever it's called, I forget, it's like $40 more. You get the early access on the 31st. That's what you got to do. The official release date is September 6th. But September 6th means 8 p.m. on September 5th, I'm pretty sure, but I didn't check that. I only checked the early access date. All right, so GMT update. Whole bunch of stuff. They just charged for a whole bunch of stuff, including 18 India, a pile of Commands and Colors Napoleonics things, and Pursuit of Glory second edition. Mr. President is sold out. I told you folks this would happen. I also told you that it would get reprinted, and it is. Presumably, they're going to incorporate the errata kit. Okay, so next month, when they have all the details ready, they will list a second printing and an update kit for those who would like it. I may have some complaining to do about the update kit, but we'll see. I'll wait until the actual news before jumping on them. Before my North Africa 41 is in the pipeline too. It should be here soon. I don't know. It's UPS, so. But I'm not going to jump on them about the update kit making us pay for errata until I see the details. All right, so GMT 2023 June 2023 releases Border Reavers People Power, which has been fairly well received as well. Barracks Emperors, also some people have liked it. I looked at it and decided pretty quickly that it was not going to be my bag. So I passed on Border Reavers, or not Border Reavers, Border Reavers 2, but Border Reavers, at least it's very pretty. I will say that. Barracks Emperors just looks like it's just not a game I'm going to like. And Under the Southern Cross, which is, hey, that's my unboxing video. I didn't notice that before. All right, the GMT 2023 replacement counter sheet update. They are ready to send it to the printer. They've added several new counters to the sheet. It's $3. This is shipping included. $3 in the US, $8 out of the US. People are complaining about that, and I'm not going to say that's not justified, but it at least if you're in the US, it is $3. It's difficult to buy a cheeseburgers for $3. David Thompson, thanks for stopping by. And yeah, I would anticipate that Pacific Chase will make its number very quickly. So that's my guess. What do I notice on here that I didn't see before? I'm not sure I see anything off the top of my head, but I'm not going to do a compare and contrast here live on the show. So was Stalingrad 42 on that list before? I don't remember it being, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't either. So let's adjust that just a little bit. All right, so it's going to the printer by the end of August, and then they will charge and ship it just like a normal P500 item. Please order it ASAP if you want one. I have, of these like 13 games, 13 games, I have like 9 of them, so obviously I got to get it. All right. Fields of Fire series development diary. Update from Alan Emmerich on Frank Chadwick's ETO series progress. Go ahead and look at this if you are excited about this series, although I have not read this particular update. They are moving on it. It's just taking a while. But they're essentially completely designing all of the games in the series concurrently, as opposed to working on them one at a time. So, Ardwulf, first of all, thank you too for stopping by tonight. If I have said before that if I get an hour per dollar out of the game. I feel like I've gotten my money's worth out of the games. Do I count solo plays or just play against? No, I think you should count solo plays. I mean, if so, on the one hand, I run a YouTube channel that does this stuff, so maybe one considers doing like channel content, which is the majority of stuff that I do solitaire is channel stuff. Um, maybe one considers that work and not enjoyable, but to be blunt, if I hate it, I am not going to continue it. So yes, I would absolutely count solo content for that. Perfidious Albion, do they plan to release Africa 42 and 43 as expansions? My guess would be no, but that's a question for Mark Simonich. Um, yeah, GMT's bandwidth constraints on their website do seem to be a bit tight when there's high demand, like they're having a sale or something like that. All right, so moving along, Kyle from Playdeck has an update for Twilight Struggle Red Sea, which there's a patch for. Box back sneak peek. This is the Plum Island Horror, Herman Lutman's sort of 50s sci-fi inspired game, which looks pretty fun. GMT1 development. Jason Carr has an update on Red Dust Rebellion and In the Shadows. The Weimar Republic, which is a game I'm looking at and considering. So this is fair. Yeah, this is a good point, Marty. I hadn't really thought about it at all. So North Africa 41 is a redo of Mark's earlier game, The Legend Begins, which only covers the 41 campaign. So it I would not assume that there's a time expanding expansions intended for that unless somebody has heard that. And Marty, of course, is correct in mentioning that if you're getting into 43, then you might as well put Tunisia in there too. So, whatever Mr. Simonich would like to do, I'll be happy to buy. So clearly, as I just have, I don't actually have anything on auto order through GMT. Maybe I should. So Tony Tomlin, thank you for the subscription, much appreciated. All right, so moving on from the Weimar Republic, Fields of Fire Deluxe Edition, that's coming out as well. Here's a playtester's wanted update. 1848, the Springtime of Nations, looks particularly interesting. I think that is, I am reasonably sure I have ordered that. I should double check this stuff because I am not great at keeping track of it, but I will assuredly be picking that up. Latest vassal modules, including Commands and Colors Ancients, Plantagenet, Stalingrad 42, Border Reavers. Vassal version 3.7 is getting closer to release. Okay. Some of the capabilities are showcased in a trial version of Commands and Colors. All right, so we're not going to look at that now. But there's a new, supposedly enhanced version of Vassal coming. They've been doing enhancements to Vassal for regularly for the last couple of years. And when it's it's annoying to keep having to update it, and maybe your old modules stop working. Those enhancements have generally been net positives for Vassal. Oh, look, we've got a friendly pointer to the Chit Show with me and Dan. We had Bruce Harper and Dick Whitaker on in recent weeks. If you haven't seen, I mentioned that Netherlands East Indies here is a Joe Miranda design. We had Joe Miranda on last week. I'm not sure I've ever seen a video interview with Joe Miranda, so you should check that out. So, it really what we mean by update kit really depends. If update kit means that errata fixing the stuff that just was broken, then I'm not sure I approve of being charged for that. If a update kit means there's a new edition and this is bringing your old copy in line with the new edition, then I'm a little more comfortable with that. I am not positive that is sensible position to be in, but that's kind of how I feel about it at the moment. Yes, it is hard to find. Damn it. It is difficult to find the Rhino Games version. So Brian Jarvis mentions that the same month that a Simonich game without Zoc bonds, and North Africa 41 does not have Zoc bonds, a non-Simonich game with them is released. That is Ardennes 2 from MMP and Dean Essig. Now, it doesn't sound, I have not looked at Ardennes 2. It does not sound like the implementation is quite the same, but it is the same basic idea. And I'm very curious to see. I'm always curious to see what Dean's got to say as a designer. So, and Perry Sparopoulos mentions an update kit for Thunder in the East, or as we call it around here, Thunder in the East. That's going to be a significant update kit. So I'll be curious to see if they actually do that. All right. Anyway, bunch more interviews, including some stuff from the War Room and Omo Ludens with Fred Serval. GMT pointers to the various places to see GMT stuff. P500 editions. The Last 100 Yards, Volume 5 for King and Country. Presumably, this will do the British in the Last 100 Yards system. I have not looked at that system. Yeah, I did see the designer's notes. Eric Schaefer mentions that that Dean acknowledged, because Dean's Dean's the kind of guy who will make that acknowledgement. So he clearly acknowledges the inspiration there from the Mark Simonich idea. And like I said, I'm very curious to see that. We just did a big, if you haven't seen the show that we broadcast live on Friday night, and then I re-released it as a regular video in the regular channel feed, because normally the live videos don't make it to the normal channel feed. Thank you, YouTube. So that's one of the reasons why I did that. I re-released it, I think, on Saturday or Sunday. You haven't seen the interview that we did with Danny Parker and John Butterfield about wargaming in the Bulge. You might want to do that. It was a terrific interview. Thanks to both of those fine gentlemen for being on. So, anyway, for King and Country, The Last 100 Yards, Volume 5. I haven't tried The Last 100 Yards yet. I've heard good things about it. A name I'm going to mispronounce, Zizka? I have no idea. Levian Campaign, Volume 7. Reformation and Crusade in Hussite Bohemia, 1420 to 1421. This is one of a large number of Levian campaign titles that has been in the cooker for a while. I think that is a series that is worth a look. That said, I have 3 of the games and have not given it, and a 4th on order, and I have not given it a serious playthrough yet. So I am. I'm probably going to hold off on that, but at some point we got to actually make that happen. Maybe we'll take Nevsky or Inferno up to Winterfest or something like that. All right, Caesar Rome versus Gaul 2nd edition and an update kit. This is a Mark Simonich game. This is looks like it is pretty close to the model from Hannibal Rome versus Carthage from Avalon Hill, and then it got re-released by Phalanx a few years ago. So that game. I passed on it, but it's probably pretty good. And the fact that it's already going up for P500 reprint should tell you that too. All right, recent P500 editions. I'm going to point out a couple of things here. 3 Days at Gettysburg, 1262, since it was announced last month. Thunderbolt, 825, since it was announced last month. Imperial Fever, I don't have a position on. Mark has a credit, according to BGG, with the Spearhead as well, and I haven't looked at that, but we will have a little thing at the end about upcoming Mark Herman things as well. Next War Iran's doing good. Order and Opportunity has passed the 500 threshold. That's by VPJ or VJP, or I forget the order of his initials, Arponen. That's a very interesting looking game. Some Combat Commander stuff. Guerrilla Generation is another coin multi-pack. And then 1848 Struggle of Nations, which that's a super interesting topic, by the way, the revolutions of 1848. All right, so since I don't know that we're going to cover, so I'm just looking at the names that I cannot pronounce here. So don't be shocked if Mark is in fact watching, because he's been known to watch before, and he normally does not super active, because everybody says, "Oh, it's Mark Herman, oh my god." So and I sympathize with that. Mander says, as one of the odd group for whom a game on the Hussite Crusades is an insta-buy. Cool, that's great. I like to see. So this is not a topic I know anything about. I know where Bohemia is. But I don't know anything about that. This does look like it's introducing some new mechanics to the levy and campaign mechanism. So that is potentially interesting. And it may well occur that I will end up picking this up as well. I just haven't jumped on it at this point. All right. So moving up, new P500s on the horizon, a new 18XX title. Now I'm a little unclear as to, because it seems like every 2 or 3 months, one of the new P500s on the horizon says a new 18XX title. So I don't know if that's the same thing that they keep talking about, or if it is in fact like 9 different 18XX titles that they might have in the works. I have mentioned before, I'm not a big 18XX person. I have played them in the past and have enjoyed them. I do have, I believe, 2 18XX games, one from GMT, which is, I forget which one, 1862, because it is on the shelf behind me. And I have 1835, which is actually the German edition with an English rule book that I found somewhere and put in the box. And I've played that one, and I played the original 18, not about original, but I played the 1830 that Avalon Hill did years ago. And there's a million 18XX games, and a lot of the 18XX persons have like their own 18XX game somewhere in the pipeline as well. Whether it actually gets published or not professionally is another story. All right, so fast playing World War II tactical strategy game that their internal teams really love. I don't know what that would be. A popular World War I era strategy game in a GMT Deluxe edition. So it doesn't say whether that is their popular World War I game or somebody else's popular World War I game. Um, Boy, it would be cool if it was Great War in Europe. That would be really cool. I would love it if GMT would bring that back. And a co-design from Mark Herman and Mark Simonich. I did not do this on purpose, folks. I've actually had this Mark Herman show penciled in for at least 2 months. So mentioning Mark's name this often was not by design, but I'm comfortable with it. All right, yearly bestsellers. You can look at these coming events. PAX Ludica in Cadiz, Spain. That's probably awesome. I'm not going. Game More 2, Oregon, Albany, Oregon, October 6th through 9th. It does sound like this was fantastic last year. And it's always great to see our comrades in the Pacific Northwest get some conventions. We've already got more conventions around here than I can go to. So fall 2023 weekend at the warehouse, October 12th to the 15th. And there's like at least three, maybe four, 5 or 6 actually, between like the middle of October and the middle of November, wargaming centered game conventions. And they're already planning the one in spring as well. All right, SD HistCon is one of those. This is November 3rd through the 5th in beautiful San Diego, California, and will feature 3 full days of gaming, including many guests, including Mark Herman, Jason Matthews, David Thompson, and Ananda Gupta, Cole Worley, Tori Brown, yours truly, which I take to be Harold. I think that's Harold. Could be somebody at GMT. I don't know, but they'll all be there too, right? So there will be no shortage of prominent folks at that event. So you can be assured of that. All right, this looks like the War Room. That's Jester and Ruff and Tony playing the Plum Island Horror with Herman. Like I said, that's probably fun. Judd will get a mention here when we talk about France 1944, actually. So I don't know if Judd is like really doing the YouTube thing. At least not on his own. All right, so updates on Rally the Troops. I don't know that any of this is new. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. The Longest Trench from Udo Grebe Games, fast-playing World War I card game. That might be interesting. Mr. President Vassal and Tabletop Simulator. I would not consider playing that on Tabletop Simulator personally, but Vassal, I'd have no issue with whatsoever. All right, another Voco video on Plantagenet, support for Fields of Fire, last 3 yards. What else do we got here? All right, Player's Aid, learning materials for Rebellion Britannia, Twilight Struggle Red Sea, Andean Abyss. The Board Games Chronicle has done a bunch of videos on how to play Pacific War. You can be sure that that's getting a mention this evening. All right, not yet there. P500 items. If you haven't taken a look at these, go ahead and take a look at these. Some of these are really good, really promising looking games, or new printings of already known promising looking games. And some of them, like For the People, man, For the People is going to get reprinted sooner or later, right? But some of these are brand new and need a little more attention. All right, so more from the player's aid. Okay, all right. So current charges and near future shipments starting on August 24th. That is 2 days from now, 3 days, whatever. This week. 18 India, CNC Napoleonics, the Austrian, Prussian, Russian, and Spanish armies, plus the base game, plus the fancier dice, plus Pursuit of Glory second edition. The next charges and shipments will be, and this is arriving in the warehouse in the next couple of weeks, so it's on a boat right now. That'll include Downfall, plus the mounted maps, plus 3-inch box, Great Battles of Alexander Expanded Deluxe. If you do not have a copy of Great Battles of Alexander, and you are interested, you think you do want it, this is the one to get, because this has all of the stuff in it, including the Tyrant module. So I have the last printing of it, which did not include Tyrant. So I have Tyrant, but it's on the old thin counters. So I did order this new version of Tyrant, and Sovereign of Discord for Fire in the Lake, which I am also on the hook for. And that is the Fire in the Lake expansion that extends the timeline of play further back to I forget exactly how long, but it may even go all the way into the French period. So no, you know what? This is Mark being the smartest person in the room as usual, did the smart thing and put Judd to work. So he's like, yeah, I got some stuff for you to do. Take care of this for me. Well, yeah. And just, oh yes, Mr. Herman, sir. All right. So production schedule. We've already covered all this stuff. Next to ship to GMT, Napoleonics Expansion 5, Generals, Marshals, and Tacticians. CNC Samurai Battles, second printing, last 100 yards, the Russian front at the printer includes Banish All Their Fears, which is the musket and pike spinoff. It's not musket and pike, it's like a spinoff of musket and pike. CNC Medieval second printing, Napoleonics Expansion 6, which I'm on the hook for, Epic Napoleonics Norman Conquests, Men of Iron Volume 5, which I'm on the hook for, Panzer North Africa Prime Minister, which actually looks pretty good too, Tanto Manta, which is another game in the similar family to Here I Stand and or Virgin Queen, both of which are very good games. Here I Stand is better when it's better and not as good as Virgin Queen when it isn't. And that is a function of, do you have the right number of players and do you have the correct players playing the correct player positions? If you don't, if you do, then Here I Stand is better. If you don't, then Virgin Queen is better. We'll see about Tanto Manta. That looks interesting. Mo from Mo's Game Table, thanks for stopping by. And as Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp mentions, the Wargame Bootcamp will be up and running at SD HistCon, as I would expect, since he's like there. All right. Also, the Palm Island Horror and Vijaya Nagara. Going to the printer late this month includes 2020, more money. The 2023 replacement counter sheet and Rebel Fury. Rebel Fury we'll talk about later. That is Mark's Civil War Omnibus package. In final art and proofing, new entries here are France. Oh God, yeah, okay. So For the People, fourth printing, mounted map in 3-inch box. France 40 second printing. CNC Ancients Expansion number 2, Epic Ancients, and Skies Above the Reich second printing. I'm on the hook for France 40 in that batch. In the art department, moving up, our away team, Voyages of the Pandora. I wouldn't expect that super duper soon, because that sounds, from talking to John, that sounds like it's a huge project, but it's in the art department now. And Zhang He, which I know I'm not pronouncing correctly, but that's how I've always pronounced that particular adventurous Chinese admiral's name. Ijan Tishi. Please let me know if I'm mispronouncing that. I would be stunned if 3 dogs. I mean, I've been joking about it just to egg Stigler on, but I would be stunned if that came out this year. I think I think you're well into next year. Hypothesis is correct, and I suspect it's more late next year than anything else. We have word from Stigler that he expects by Sword and Bayonet to be out first, and I think a likely timeline for that smells like first half, maybe Q3 of 2024. So Stigler, feel free to correct me if that is if I am full of it on that. Um, all right. Yeah, and so okay, so Palmer Eldritch mentions that Sovereign of Discord begins in the early 1960s. Okay, that's what I thought. I just couldn't remember the exact date. Um, and like I said, I'm on the hook for that. I think and I've talked about this before. I don't buy every coin game, and I'm not going to buy every coin game, but I do have Fire in the Lake. I think it is a very good game, and I am happy to patronize expansions to it. Although I did not buy the solo bot expansion, but I did buy Fall of Saigon because that's like more to play, right? GBACW Wilderness is in the works. I think we'll see that after we see Three Dog Deluxe, though, to be honest. Let's get some water here. I'm already feeling a little bit gravelly. All right. So, do we have anything else? Nearing art department readiness. Here I stand, second printing of the 500th anniversary edition. Virgin Queen second printing, and that's just the highlights, folks. I'm not no, I'm not giving you the entire contents there. Let's see here. These are falling out of the sheet very easily. Quite a few games nearing art department readiness, but these are the ones that Mark thinks are closest now. All right. So my understanding is that Mark has stepped back from that responsibility, but I don't know what the exact story is there. So I'll let somebody who does talk about it. So, Stigler, I'm working on this. I'm gonna have Doc send you everything. I know Mo's threatening that as well. So we're gonna make that happen. We may have to crowdfund that. I'm gonna start a GoFundMe to buy Stigler the entire Decision Games catalog. Anybody wants to participate in that, please let us know. All right, so that's the GMT update. We got a bunch of links to some various channels and outlets to talk about this stuff. Here is the back of Norman Conquests. Back looks great too, but it's the back. Here's some cards from the Plum Island Horror. More cards from the Plum Island Horror. Counters from the Plum Island Horror. More cards. Decisive Action. Here's some stuff for Order and Opportunity. Like I said, I think this looks very interesting. That's like a contemporary political game. Okay, so as Marty mentioned, and I think this came up a couple of shows ago, and I hadn't heard this, and somebody, maybe Marty, said so. Justin Martinez is the new GMT art director, and they have to stop cutting and pasting the text in these monthly updates then. So, Hands in North Africa. Anything else interesting here? Very, very much looking forward to seeing Away Team as well. It just looks like my kind of thing. Here's the updates on the reprints and all that stuff. All right, so that is the GMT update, folks. We are done with that. And we're going to be moving on to Mr. Herman. Let's hold that up so I can keep an eye on it while we get into the topic. So the first thing that we are going to bring up, do I want to keep that there or do I want to move that over here? I have it locked. Dipshit. There we go. All right, so that'll work out a little bit better. All right, so this is Raid. This is a game about commando operations stretching from World War II to the then contemporary period. This is a 1977 game release from SPI, and I didn't note which issue of S&T this was, but it is obviously out of Strategy and Tactics magazine. Mark is listed as the designer of this game. I checked. We had to check on a number of the early entries actually, because a couple of these were Mark Herman developed games rather than designed. And I left, I think, all but one of those out actually. October War, I think, was one example of I think Mark was the developer rather than the designer. So this was I'll let me talk about this. So you may have seen the two recent unboxing videos of the Battles in the East series from Decision and designer Tony Burkett. And I know Tony. I think I consider Tony a buddy. And I really like the work that Tony has done with OCS, as Marty mentions. So in his development process, Tony has found a bunch of situations that don't really work for OCS, but could really work for the system that he adapted out of tradition, a more a variety of really traditional games like Panzer Group Guderian and Cobra and a couple of other things. I was happy to jump on these particular titles from Tony, and from talking to them, it sounds like they're doing very well, and so we can probably expect the series to be continued. And I know that Tony has a volumes 3 and 4 in the works, and maybe more than that. I'm not sure. So now, on the other hand, I don't have any particular argument to make about the price. I mean, the price is what the price is, and I don't know. I don't have an eye on the numbers that they're using to determine what the MSRP ends up being. So I can only say whether I would consider it too high for me or not, and I don't consider it too high for me or not. Although they were kind enough to give me some copies to take a look at, so I did not actually have to make that difficult decision. So thank you, Decision Games and Doc specifically, and Tony for that matter. So they are worth a look. They are easy to play. There's like 7 pages of rules. There's like another 1 page of game specific rules. They will play very easily and pretty quickly once you get the hang of it. So they're worth a look. Anyway, Raid. I don't have a whole lot to say about this, other than the observation that this appears to be Mark's first published design. Although there may well have been, I started researching this based on BGG, so I have a hunch that there's some earlier games that Mark may have contributed to, but maybe BGG doesn't list it, so I didn't catch it. That's possible. $25 for shipping. Ugh. Well, that seems high, I have to say. I wonder if there are alternatives for that. In any case, next after Raid, we have a game that I think is not particularly fondly remembered. This is despite the interesting topic and the very nice team of designer and developer on this. Design Frank Davis. This is developed by Mark Herman. This game, I think, I have not looked at this. I have never personally held a copy of this in my hand, so I can't speak to it. However, it is a pretty interesting topic, and I'd be curious to take a look at it, but it does not seem to have been particularly fondly remembered. Let me get a. These are the boxes for those games. You watch the unboxing videos, but they're standard bookcase boxes, but the maps are mounted, so they are fairly heavy. What Decision is doing to ship stuff, I'm not sure. So you're probably taking it in the shorts on the cross country shipping, though. Whenever I've shipped through the USPS to the West Coast, it's been outrageous. Which is, of course, that's when you turn to flat rate, but then you don't have. You'd have to use the flat rate boxes. So, and I don't like the flat rate boxes for shipping war games because I've had too many games arrived crushed. So there's that. Eric from Eric's Table Napoleonic Battles. Thanks for coming by tonight. All right. So Red Sun Rising, another very early entry, 1977. Next up is Stonewall. Now, this one I have had in my hands. So this is interesting, and it's plausible that Mr. Stigler can shed a little bit of light on this because I see this listed with the Great Battles of the American Civil War system. However, the actual game itself does not include a GBACW rulebook. It's just a Stonewall rulebook, and it's a solo credit to Mark Herman. So I'm unclear as to how this differs from the other GBACW games that were floating around at the time. My understanding is that it is a bit different than those other early GBACW games, and I'm hoping Stigler will shed some light on this. What I can tell you is that it's got a great cover, the magazine cover. This is an S&T game as well, obviously. Well, actually, this cover doesn't show that. This is the cover of the box version. They did a box version. This hilariously is in a 2-inch box too. Um, the yeah, so you pay for the free box in the fact that the shit arrives crushed. So there's that. Um, so this was an S&T game. And that may be the difference between the two different versions of the rules. But it's got a great cover, same cover as S&T, and it's Kernstown, obviously. And it is a very small battle, a very small number of pieces. I don't know if I'm not sure if it's full size map or not. I don't remember that. But the number of counters in it is quite small. It's like, I don't know, maybe 60 counters, something like that. Kernstown's not an enormous battle, so that's got to be part of it. But it's even so, it's surprisingly small game. Um, so okay, so Stigler, and this makes sense to me. Stigler says that this was the first step a little bit away from Terrible Swift Sword and towards the more formal system series, Great Battles of the American Civil War. Okay, and that makes sense because the genesis of it is Terrible Swift Sword. But some of the early games, there was some experimentation going on. It felt like. The trouble with this is that it in a you can get away with it with a 2-inch bookcase box. In a 3-inch bookcase box, there is no real room for padding, and that's where I've had issues in the past. All right, so next up after Stonewall is this is a game designed by Jim Dunnigan, developed by Mark Herman, but it sounds like Mark did a lot of work on this, and it is organized correctly. Um, this is a super interesting game, actually. It's kind of got like an action point economy where you move units one at a time. This is from memory, basically. So if I'm saying anything stupid, say something. Um, so you have like this sort of action point economy in which units have, I don't know what the terminology used in the actual game is either. So you have these action points, and the units can use them to move, use them to fight, do a variety of different things, and you activate one unit at a time. This game, so this is the what was very hot at the time. Next war in Europe, NATO versus Warsaw Pact. There were a million games about this. I want to say this is roughly in the 1980 to 1983 hypothetical conflict time frame. No, other than being Perisporopolis, other than being about near future hypothetical conflicts, no, totally unrelated. And in fact, back in the day, this day, near future hypothetical conflicts basically meant NATO versus Warsaw Pact at some level, whether it was going to be nukes flying or ground troops or proxy wars or whatever. Nowadays, the GMT next war stuff is contemporary to us rather than contemporary to the late 70s and early 80s. Okay. I wouldn't say that this is true. There's probably some shared idea DNA there, but I would not characterize that this way. Now, bear in mind, I have recently picked up Fifth Core. I want to say Fifth Core is the Central Front game that I got because I wanted to see it. And I haven't really taken a look at it yet, partly because the guy didn't ship me a series rule book, so I got to go find one and print one. I can do that; it's not a big deal. got to do that. Perfidious Albion mentions that this is much more complicated than GDW's Third World War. That's absolutely correct. I would say it's a more seriously constructed simulation. I would agree with that. Now, I will mention, so this is not how I would put this. So the back in the days of Google Plus, when Google Plus was still an ongoing concern and Google hadn't taken it down yet because for whatever stupid reason they had, there was actually a really hopping tabletop analog game community for RPGs. But I was actually running the Wargamers group on Google Plus for a while. And Fabrizio and his folks over there in Italy were playing this and posting fairly regular updates. And they were inspired by it and or began to modify it and or turned it into their own thing. And I would characterize the 1985 series as, at this point, its own thing. And what that eventually turned into is 1985 Under an Iron Sky, and then 2 follow-up games, Deadly Northern Lights and Sacred Oil, to kind of complete a 1985 Cold War Goes Hot trilogy. In many of the details, I think the games are fairly different, but the broad strokes of it, like that action point mechanic, that is carried through with both games. So the Thin Red Line C3 games are the direct sort of reimagining of the Central Front games. The 1985 games are sort of the reimagining of the Next War. So just to clarify that. So I had this at one point, and I traded it away for a copy of Empire of the Petal Throne, which I can't particularly complain about. But I want to say it was unpunched when I got it, and I did punch it, and probably clipped it too because I think I was clipping by then. But I don't. We never actually got to play it. This was in an SPI soapbox. It was one of the SPI soapboxes that was not released in a flat tray, although you may have been able to buy it in a Ziploc format because SPI actually did sell stuff in Ziplocs. It's just that there were so many of those trays floating around that a lot of the Ziploc games got stuck in the flat trays anyway. If you like see them now on the secondary market. Ugh. Anyway, so super interesting game. One gets the sense that this probably could have used some more time in the cooker back in the day. But at the same time, it's a memorable enough experience that's a whole group of people decided they were going to riff on it and bring it into a new generation with updated mechanics and certainly graphics. So I want to make sure I don't make that sound more backhanded to Thin Red Line Games than I mean it to, because I think they have done a really good job on it. And I think that if you are interested in this topic and interested in exploring these mechanical ideas, So on the one hand, the Next War is not terribly easy. It's like a 1980 release. Is that correct? 1978 release. Okay, so it's not terribly easy to get your hands on, and it can run for decent change. But you also can get it for 100 or 125 bucks or something like that. That is actually considerably cheaper by about 4 times what you can reasonably expect to get a copy of Under an Iron Sky for. Because those Thin Red Line productions were printed in obscenely small quantities. And they're very hard to get a hold of. So I would say if you have one of the 1985 games, I'd say fire that up instead of running down the Next War. But at the same time, those are just as hard to get, really, and more expensive, to be honest. You can get a copy of the Next War cheaper. And I would buy this if I would buy this again at the right price. The right price is real cheap, okay, by going rate standards. I mean, if I could get this for 50 or 60 bucks, I would probably buy it. Stigler, thank you very much. I may hit you up at some point. It's just a matter of figuring out that time frame. Perry Sporopoulos asks, what is my preferred Cold War Goes Hot operational level game? And folks in the chat, feel free to chime in with this too. I am really fond of. So this isn't my favorite topic, but I am not totally uninterested in it either. Um, and I feel like I have too many games on it, to be blunt. But I really like the GDW Third World War series, and I also really like the new. So for that, it really doesn't matter too much whether you have the old GDW ones or the new Compass ones. The new Compass one is graphically very much nicer, and it handles better because there's more information on the counters that you would otherwise just have to memorize. So it's a lot easier to play, but mechanically they're the same game. Okay. The other converse example is NATO: The Cold War Goes Hot from Bruce Maxwell, released originally for Victory Games back in 1983, I think 1983, and that was the first, if not one of the first, if not the first, releases from Victory Games. And Bruce wasn't really ever happy with it, so his new version from Compass is, while not a complete redesign, it's a comprehensively revised second edition. It is a substantially different game, and it is outstanding as well. I would like to really try the Central Front games, but for me, that's more to kind of explore that friction point mechanic that Dunnigan used there than it is out of strictly topical interest. I am also not terribly interested in modern conflicts, generally speaking. My interest is in the historical stuff. And I guess, we're far enough away from it now that if somebody did a good game on the Iraq War, I might, well, one of the Iraq wars, I might be interested in that. But otherwise, my interest kind of fades out around Vietnam. And I guess I got a Falklands game coming at some point too. So not slightly. It's NATO is one. Is it two maps? I think it's two maps actually. Where Third World War is actually no. You're closer to being correct than I was about to say. They're closer in scale than it appears. That the Third World War covers more area, and that's why there's more maps. Um. All right. So moving on, we have maybe debatably the best cover ever to appear, on a war game. John Carter, Warlord of Mars. The cover art here is by Don Mates, who's a pretty legendary sci-fi and fantasy artist, and it's a terrific cover. And terrific. I assume that Redmond Simonson did the graphic design. I mean, the cover's the rest of the cover, not just the art, is also very striking. I had this for a couple of years back in the day, and in this case, the day is like the '90s, early '90s maybe. And I ended up getting rid of it. I regret that. I think it just wasn't something I was looking for at the time. So, as a teenager, I would say I was really into the Edgar Rice Burroughs stuff, and in particular, really into the John Carter stuff, more so than the Tarzan stuff. Tarzan stuff was surprisingly a lot better than I expected it to be. But I might feel differently about it now, but I liked it at the time. And the John Carter stuff I really enjoyed. And what I was really kind of looking for was a John Carter RPG, and this was not that. Does have some sort of there are some what I would call light RPG elements in this, but it's not an RPG in any sense. If you do want a John Carter RPG, the one that's out now from Modifius, right? Yeah, it's Modifius. Is really well done. Um, so there's that. Oh, John, you should see the update kits that are coming for this. Let me tell you, update kits galore. So I got rid of this, and I do regret that. I mean, just for the incredibly handsome cover, if nothing else. A terrific cover, and it's kind of an interesting looking game too, and it's sort of got this. It's like this adventure. It's like almost like an adventure board game with like different types of components. This will actually remind the folks who've seen it of that Star Wars Queen's Gambit board game, actually, where there's kind of like multiple different sectors, which kind of are their own mini games happening at the same time concurrently. Um, that's a Mark Herman thing. That's kind of what this has going on. So it's a really interesting looking game that I wish I wouldn't have gotten rid of. Maybe I'll get it again at some point, but I'm not going to pay $150 for it. That's for sure. Not that I haven't not even looked at what this is going for. So do not ask me. For the record, I did like. Well, I think I could quibble in a purist type of way about the movie. Generally speaking, I really rather liked the movie. I think the worst thing I have to say about it is Taylor Kitsch as John Carter. I'm not sure that was a great piece of casting. But the rest of the casting was actually really good. And generally speaking, I thought it was a reasonable update to the very old material. Remember, the first book was published in, I believe, 1912. So to say that it's dated would be an understatement. Um, I liked the movie. There was a management change at Disney, and it was one of those situations where new management did not want the old management's project to succeed. So they made sure that it didn't. And what we might have gotten a trilogy out of turned into just the one movie. But I will say that the one movie is pretty good. It's not as red as I wanted it to be. I guess that's the worst visual thing I could say about it. Is it should be more red because it's the red planet. God damn it. But the Tharks are handled really well, and the Therns are handled really well, and Woola is handled really well. There's a lot to like about that movie. And I thought Lynn Collins was an absolutely 100% credible Deja Thoris. All right. So next is I agree that Empire Strikes Back is the best Star Wars movie, by the way. I think you got to give a lot of props to the first one because it was the first one, but I think the best of the movies is Empire Strikes Back, and I don't believe that's likely to change. All right, so here we have Gulf Strike. This is another. This is Mark Herman design from Victory Games. I think the original publication was in 1983, but there were at least 3 editions of this. And if you're going to get it, this is probably the one to have, the one that includes the Desert Shield expansion module, because then this actually updates it to Desert Shield, right? And I think you'd want that. So the famous story that Mark has told many times about this is that when the Gulf War broke out, they did not have the Pentagon had not wargamed this. So they immediately sent people out to the local hobby stores, bought all the copies of Gulf Strike, and called Mark up and said, get down here, sign this sworn document of secrecy. And here's some classified data, update everything, and they're playing it by that afternoon. So that's an amusing story, just from a story perspective. I mean, that should tell you something about the seriousness of this as a simulation. And I'll have more to say about that later, actually, when we get too close to the end of the show, when we start talking about upcoming products. So if you want the Gulf, at least the early part of the Gulf War, or of this Gulf War, I suppose, this is probably the one to have. I would say I'm not aware of anything with a comparably good reputation. I liked Rogue One as well. Moving on, France 1944. Now, this is another Victory Games release, and I got another one that I haven't really looked at. So my knowledge of this pretty much comes from the conversations that were occurring around the new edition, which is this edition from Compass's Designer Signature Edition. And that leads me to think that there are some very interesting things mechanically occurring in this game. So topically, this is basically exactly what you think it is. It's 1944. The Allies are invading. It's Western Europe. This is the Judd Vance story of Judd had sung the praises of this previously on some videos or wherever, and he got in a conversation with Mark about redoing it, and Mark said, "Okay, you're the developer now," and Judd redid this. Now, it does look to me like Judd took that super duper seriously. There's like some real serious enhancements to play aids and stuff like that in this version of the game, in this Compass version of the game. I was not crazy about Solo. It wasn't horrific, but Alden Ehrenreich simply did not sell me on him being Han Solo. It did not connect in that way. And that's maybe it's unfair to him because those are big shoes to fill. Let me put it that way. So, oh, holy John Stanley, thank you so much. John Stanley says that, as some have stated with a great deal of justification, that Star Wars: A New Hope borrows heavily from the Searchers for ideas for scenes on the desert planet. That's totally true. He also borrows the characters of C3PO and R2D2, mostly 3PO, admittedly, directly from the Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress. So, and the inspirations from things like Flash Gordon were also relatively obvious as well. But I found that a little less credible than the direct borrowings from things like Kurosawa or The Searchers. I should see The Searchers. That would be a good idea. And I would imagine to some extent that Lawrence of Arabia must have been an inspiration as well, right? So, big desert after all, giant desert. So, thank you, John Stanley, for the support. Um, all right. So, yeah, I'm not sure what happened to this. I don't know if Mark just wasn't able to make the progress on it. There was to have been a companion game called Russia 1944 that would link up with France 1944, and I don't know if that is a thing that Mark was just not able to finish, or if that is a bridge that Bill set on fire. Either one of those is a possible outcome. So I do not know. So, but yeah, that would have been interesting as well. But this is probably one that I probably ought to pick up. I am already working on a shopping list for Compass Expo in November. So, all right, next up is another really unique game, and this is a motif we will be coming back to repeatedly. The Peloponnesian War. This is a game about the Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta. In this case, 431 to 404 BC. Now, there's very good primary sources or ancient sources on this. I'm not sure they're primary or not. And there's been some very good contemporary, or more or less contemporary, with us scholarship on the topic as well. So the interesting thing about the game is that it is a solitaire game in which you may be forced to switch sides. You might be playing Athens and you're doing pretty well, but not as well as you need to do to win. And suddenly you're now playing Sparta. That is really interesting. And not a thing that I'm not sure anybody else has even tried to do that. First of all, because from a design standpoint, that seems absurdly difficult to me. To how to design something like that, I have no idea. So, but then again, that's why Mark's a genius and I'm not. So there's that. So we are done clipping this, by the way. About 68 minutes in. Not surprising. They're 5/8 inch counters, so not a shock. So super, super interesting game. And I didn't get a copy. So this was redone by GMT a few years ago in a handsome new edition. However, that said, I'm not necessarily the biggest fan of the graphic design style and methodology they used at Victory Games. It was fine in places and certain things, and not as good at certain things. I do think this is actually a very good looking game from Victory Games. We are clipping Netherlands East Indies, this one from S&T from last year. So this is a very nice cover. The map looks nice. I mean, the map in the new one looks great too, but I thought the old one looked quite good, actually. I mean, it's a point-to-point map. But very interesting game. Very, very interesting game. I probably shouldn't have gotten rid of 2 copies of it over the years, to be honest. Jeff Beeler asks about best counter clipper. I like the Oregon Laminations heavy duty, meaning the one that doesn't say deluxe. That is this one. not the deluxe one. And I say not the deluxe one. The deluxe one's a little easier to use. It's a little easier to get used to, but they break, and those don't. So that's why I prefer those. Um, so anyway, Peloponnesian War. Moving on. Next up, now we're kind of standing in here for all of the Great Battles of History series because there's I think 16 or something like that volumes in this series, and Mark was involved in as designer or co-designer, usually co-designer, on all but a couple of them, and I otherwise would have almost doubled the size of this list, and we'd be talking till midnight, which I do not propose to do. So I just went with this one. Okay, now I think I may have misstated this in the past because while Mark is the credited designer on this, the developer is Richard Berg. And I do feel like, based on statements that have been made afterwards, that Berg's contribution, even on this first volume, was very substantial, and that they're just credited as co-designers moving forward on the series, starting with volume 2, which was SPQR. Now, this is the original edition, and they reused this art for the rule book inside the new edition. But the current edition that's coming out anytime now is going to have roughly 30 different battles in it. That might not be the exact number, but it's something like that. It's a large number of battles. You will get an enormous amount of value out of that kit. So I have no doubt that that's a good value. So checking on something here. Okay. Having watched, I honestly have been unable to sit through the entire movie, but I did watch the Battle of Gaugamela, and it is well done. The battle is really good. So that leaves me with a lot of hope for Oliver Stone, and that's Ridley Scott. Never mind, forget it. Ridley Scott's pretty good at battle scenes too, though. So now I did this, and I found that this made them a little harder to use. That's actually this one. I actually glued 2 dice in it, and it just doesn't quite close enough. So I actually like sawed one of these dice in half and like took the belt grinder to the other one, and just to kind of get it to close a little more. And I felt like it made it awkward. But what that will do is it will lessen. Let me pull this down for a minute. What that will do is that because you won't be able to close the jaws as tight, it will remove stress from this weak part inside the unit here. And I avoid using this where possible, but I do have some confidence that this is not going to break at this point. So I prefer the standard at this point because I've been using them for a long time. You can choke up on the clippers more, but that's more stress on your hands. And if you got old ass arthritic hands, that's going to be an issue. I have clipped that, but I used the standard rather than the deluxe. So in any case, let's pull this back up. We're still back with Great Battles of Alexander. So the whole GBOH series, Great Battles of History, I think was intended to be a little broader than it ended up being. Because remember, like volume 3 or 4 is Lion of the North, which is Gustavus Adolphus and the 30 Years' War. And they never revisited anything quite that late. But they did do some medieval topics, a variety of different medieval topics, like the Mongols and the 2 Japanese games, which I would call medieval. And everything else in the series has pretty much been ancient. In the ancients period, either in antiquity or late antiquity, sometimes really early activity, as is the case with Chariots of Fire. This is, in my opinion, the premier serious hex encounter ancients tactical game series. There are a number of others. Certainly, Commands and Colors Ancients is fun. There's that Ancients series from either 3W or Decision. There's been a variety of other things over the years that have done one-off battles. And I do consider this to be the definitive word on the series as a whole, not just Alexander, the definitive word on Ancients Tactical. The series is less unified than you might think there is no series rulebook and never has been, and I don't think there ever will be. There are significant differences between Alexander and SPQR, and then some of the subsequent games. And then a chit pull mechanic gets brought in with at least with Hoplite, maybe with one of the previous games as well. And then there's a whole naval game that's a completely unrelated game. That's just here's a naval game called War Galley. So there's that. There's an enormous extent of material for this series, and I think now that I have the reprint of Great Battles of Caesar, I had Caesar, but it was the old one, and the counters were super thin, and I didn't have all the expansions for it. That has all the expansions. I want to say I have, other than the scenarios that have appeared in C3I over the years. I believe that I have gotten the entire series now. And I should probably play it more, but I have played it some. Um, so great series, one of my favorites. I do hope that folks will continue to put games out in this series. Marno Mark was talking about a Hoplite 2 at one point, and I'm not sure where that's at, which was going to basically cover more Peloponnesian War battles. That would have been absolutely fascinating, and I'd be delighted to buy that. Whatever they would like to do in this series, I'll be happy to buy them. And certainly they keep reprinting Alexander and SPQR and several other titles. So all right, this is the one landscape box in the whole kit. We the People. This is the Avalon Hill edition from 1998. This is what many consider to be the first card-driven war game, and it is a card-driven war game, and many people balked at this mechanic at the time. You revisiting this now, you'll be surprised at exactly how light this is. I was surprised revisiting this, just how light it is. Now this is not well. Can I get a yes? Okay, so originally released as We the People. I have this terrible hang up where I can't get it straight when the time comes to actually say We the People versus For the People. I always say the wrong one. This is We the People. This is the American Revolution at a more or less strategic level. Okay. This was redone for GMT a number of years later in a game called Washington's War. This is the one that I actually have now. Of the two, I believe there are some significant differences between the two editions, and certainly the GMT edition looks nicer, a lot nicer. So I would this is not really my bag. I feel like the area control mechanic is kind of really dominant in it, and you're just kind of pushing factors around, and I didn't really like that. So this I'm not the world's biggest fan of Washington's War. However, the very next game we're going to talk about, and again, this is the original Avalon Hill cover. And I'll point out that we just literally mentioned this in the GMT update because it's a reprint on P500 is For the People. Okay. So this is the follow-up, and this is as you think it is. It's the Civil War. And this is where the sort of full flowering of the Mark Herman card-driven mechanic emerges. Okay. I think it's tentative in For the see, I just did it. We the People. And here it is in For the People, and this is an absolutely brilliant game. This is incredibly evocative of the American Civil War. It's rich in detail. It is that's so weird. The video stream on the display from YouTube is actually showing me the video from like an hour and a half ago. So weird. So this is the game that not only kind of sold me on card-driven games, but sold me on the friggin' Civil War. And now I have a million Civil War games. So again, there is a new version from GMT. That's the one to get. Get a recent version because it's got a mounted map and the thicker counters and all that jazz. But this is a brilliant game. It is fairly complicated. I certainly wouldn't call it extremely complicated, but I would call it fairly complicated. It is noticeably more complicated than Washington's War, which is not complicated. Now, this is where we start getting into, this is where in the course of our discussion, we start getting into the topic of Mark Herman designs and complexity. Because this is where I began to experience that. Okay. There is a tendency, and part of this is Mark as a designer, and part of this is me as a war gamer, gravitating toward more complicated games. Okay. So I have generally gravitated toward Mark's more complicated games. And in many cases, and in some cases where the game's not that complicated, I felt like the mechanics were so different that I was nevertheless found it very challenging to pick up on the core concepts of the game. I did not find that to be the case with For the People, or We the People for that matter. Or Alexander, to be honest. But I never played Gulf Wars, and I never got to play the next war. And those are two examples where I think that could be picked as games that were complicated and hard to get to. Oh God, Kevin Featherly. So I'm reluctant to draw a direct comparison here because they are very different games. Um, but in my opinion, For the People is a far superior game in every respect to Lincoln's War. Far superior. Take that for what it's worth. Lincoln's War is simpler, so there's that. If you want simpler, cool. But I think independent of complexity, I think For the People is a far superior game. I do not actually have a high opinion of MMP's Lincoln's War. I love MMP. I love a lot of their games, not Lincoln's War. There's as I recall, there's a really obvious exploit that is permitted by the rules that the designer just said, "Well, just don't play with anybody that uses that." This is a Martin Wallace. That's a Martin Wallace design, and that caused me to lose all respect for Lincoln's War and about 90% of respect for Martin Wallace. I thought that was a bad reaction to a design flaw that was pointed out to him. Now, if he suggested a house rule to fix it, that would have been one thing. It just blow it off. I think that was lame. So that's just me. But a lot of people like Martin Wallace designs, and maybe not all of his games have giant gaping anus-sized holes in them that you have to then challenge him to come up with a solution for, and he'll just blow you off. But that makes me not want to bother investigating that because that's not a design methodology I respect. It says to me, this designer does not care. That's the message that I got. I could be thinking of a different game. Maybe it's not Lincoln's War. If so, I will retract everything. The designer I'm thinking of is Martin Wallace. But it could be that Lincoln's War is not the game I am thinking. So that was embarrassing. Oh, it might have been A Few Acres of Snow. That's possible. This is possible that it might have been A Few Acres of Snow. But nevertheless, I still think that For the People is a considerably better game than Lincoln's War. So, all right, moving on. What I think a lot of people would probably call the Mark Herman masterpiece, Empire of the Sun, and I have not placed it in the masterpiece position on purpose. And this is despite the fact that I have said this is the 2005 release. Is that correct? 2005. So I would say this is plausibly the best war game in the last 20 years. I think that is plausible. And I think you can easily make a very good case for that. This is a masterfully done game. Some people have described this as a monster game. I disagree with that judgment, but because I think you can play this in an afternoon from beginning to end if you know what you're doing. It is a challenging game. It is not simple, but not monstrously complicated by any means. But it is challenging, especially to kind of make all the bits and bobs and levers and dials actually work. And like the magnum opus that we will get to last, it is somewhat sensitive to mistakes in that if you misinterpret the way that something is supposed to work, the game kind of falls apart to a lesser extent than said magnum opus. So my opinion of Empire of the Sun is really, really, really high. And it is way more playable than the magnum opus. Let me put it that way. And I think we can all see where magnum opus is going here. But actually, you know what? I believe this is the game I was thinking of. So I am I may be un. So in that case, I don't trust my judgment about how good Lincoln's War is. I think I'm safe in saying I'd rather play For the People, but I might be just screwing those up. I suspect I've been conflating those two games for several years, actually. So thank you, Mike, for that helpful clarification. I'm not sure Mark put it quite this way, but I mean, for a lot of people, it is going to be a better game than Pacific War because you could play out the entire Pacific War in an afternoon. It's 1.5 counter sheets, it's one map. There's no meaningful off-map displays that you got to keep a bunch of stuff hanging around, and it certainly does not feel shallow. It provides you with a deep, rich Pacific experience at the strategic level. So, from that sense, it is a better war game than Pacific War. But they're not the two things I think are not trying to be the same kind of game either. And I think that's the difference that I'm going to draw when we get to that. Now I'm trying to catch up on that this conversation here. So, I mean, you can definitely see that some of the same logic, is that the word I'm thinking of? Some of the same thinking went into both games. There are, even though mechanically they're really not similar in any meaningful way. But you can definitely see that. I mean, you can see that they're from the same designer just looking at the designs, and I think you can see some of the same thinking involved in the development of the mechanics in both designs. I mean, if we're looking for recommendations on games about the Pacific War, it is a challenging game. You will be challenged to both learn this and to play it well, but it is 100% worth that investment. This is an interesting one that came up in the list that I would have otherwise forgotten. This is a co-design with Kevin Zucker, and it is an implementation of the campaigns of Napoleon's system, but it is fairly different than the other many other games in that series. Okay, so this is actually it turns it into a card driven game. Very interesting looking design. This is about the 1806 1807 campaign in Poland. um yeah, more or less. It goes all the way to Friedland. You get a lot of campaign in here. It is a very attractive game. Empire of the Sun is not an it is not a sandbox. That is absolutely true. But part of that is good design, because it is not, it is a strategic level game. Um, Now some people want the sandbox and some people don't want the sandbox too. Nobody really wants a completely scripted game, um, but some people want more of a sandbox than others. So, vigorous debate about Civil War generals going on in the chat here. So, ugh. So Kyle Harris, this is a great question. First of all, welcome to the show. Has Empire of the Sun and Pacific War still in the shrink wrap? Does starting with one help with the other? Which should you open first? So, this is tough. Uh, you will find that while I won't give either game extremely high marks for accessibility, Empire of the Sun is a far more accessible game than Pacific War in most respects, except that Pacific War gives you this sort of graduated step by step scenario path to learn the game with, which Empire of the Sun does not. Where you have these battle engagement scenarios, and then battle scenarios, and then campaign scenarios, which is where the meat of the game is, and then you have a couple of strategic scenarios, which are the entire war. And so the foot of the ramp is really pretty accessible in Pacific War, but boy, it gets pretty steep up there too. On the other hand, I don't really feel like Empire of the Sun is in itself particularly complicated. It's complicated, but it's not. I'd give it a 7 on a 1 to 9 scale. But like making it all work is challenging, right? So you kind of got to put the time in. But I think that you'll get faster dividends with Empire of the Sun first. I don't believe that either one, unless you're really intimately familiar with one. I don't believe that either one will really be any kind of direct assistance in learning the other. So let me put it that way. But great question. Um, so Perfidious Albion says Empire of the Sun uses use of cards, places a lot of uncertainty in Fog of War that is less than Pacific War, which is more straight up a conventional war game. So while there are no cards in Pacific War, I don't believe that Pacific War is a particularly conventional war game, and nor do I think that Empire of the Sun is not a conventional war game in basically every way. It's got cards, but so what? I mean, it's got hexes and counters and planes and all that stuff. So um, there's nothing really super unconventional at this point. I think we're well beyond the point where we're going to call just being card driven. Um, uh, Unconventional. On the other hand, I think Pacific War is super unconventional. There's mechanics in there that I've never seen anywhere else. Um, and let me talk about that when I get to Pacific War. Let me put it that way. Let me make sure I got time to get to Pacific War here. The Habit of Victory. I have this. I have it punched and ready to go. I have not touched it yet. The Campaigns of Napoleon's system in general is relatively high on my list of things I want to do that I haven't gotten to yet. And it's looking increasingly likely I will be getting to them this year. All right, next up is another one I have played. This is Fire in the Lake. This is a co-design with Volko Runke. This is the war in Vietnam as a coin game. This is, I think, a game that most folks would agree is a natural fit for coin. I find that the 4-faction traditional coin setup of player positions works really well here. One player plays the NVA, one player plays the Viet Cong. I think I'm getting this right. One player plays the South the South Vietnamese government, and one player plays the U.S. I think this works really well. So I'll get to this question in a second, William Barons, once I get done with Fire in the Lake, which I'm not going to talk a terribly long time about. I think this is debatably, like my personal opinion kind of wobbles back and forth between this and What Liberty or Death and Pendragon. But I think this is one of the very strongest coin games in any kind of absolute sense. Eric Goebel, thank you so much. Much appreciated. The support is greatly appreciated and helps out a lot. I really thank you so much. Thanks for coming out tonight. Not to cut Stigler off here, but I want to get to this question. So William Aarons asks, is the Habit of Victory in the OSG series, or is it different from that series of Napoleonic games? So remember that there are two different OSG series. OSG is a weird publisher in a lot of ways. But modern OSG is basically producing the stuff that Kevin Zucker wants to do. Okay. And that has for a long time been exclusively Napoleonic and exclusively been Kevin's designs and or co-designs. So the two series are the Library of Napoleonic Battles and the Campaigns of Napoleon. Okay. The Library of Napoleonic Battles is a grand tactical scale. Units are divisions or brigades. Stigler will argue about this, but Stigler will argue about anything, and we're kind of both right on this. It's not really tactical, but it's not really operational either. The scale, if you just look at the scale of the map encounters, it suggests operational, but I think the mechanics of the system lean tactical. So I call it grand tactical. Whereas Campaigns of Napoleon is a straight operational game system. Okay. The Habit of Victory is in the Campaigns of Napoleon, the operational series, none of which have cards other than that game. All of the Library of Napoleonic Battles games have cards that can be used optionally. They are not required. However, I do think they're intended by the designer to be used and not optional. It's just that some people don't like to play with the cards. I do think it's a more interesting game if you play with the cards. At least in some capacity. I'm not saying that I think everybody should play with the cards. I'm saying I think the system gains a bit of robustness by use of the cards. But Habit of Victory brings a slightly different card, well, fairly different card-driven mechanic to the operational system. And I think it's a really interesting looking game for that reason. Pete Bartlett, thanks for stopping by. Um, so I strongly suspect that by the time Hasbro got their hands on these properties, that license was years gone. Remember I mean, that'd be great, but so I'm sure they would have had to create a separate license for it. I'm a little bit amazed that Mobifius got their hands on it, actually. So anyway, Fire in the Lake. Excellent game, excellent entry in the coin series. I like I said, I think it's one of the strongest games in the coin series. It's also one of the most complicated coin games. However, again, on the convenient and widely known GMT 1 to 9 complexity system, I would rate basically every coin game somewhere between a 4 and a 6.5. This is more in that 6 to 6.5 neighborhood. Something like Cuba Libre or maybe Falling Sky might be more like a 4.5. So there's not a huge variation in complexity across the series, but this is at the higher end of that, in my opinion. There's a lot of, but remember, like strict rules, complexity is a separate question potentially from how easy it is to make all this stuff happen in play, because there's a lot of moving parts to Fire in the Lake and Pendragon, and more Fire in the Lake and Pendragon. Liberty or Death is a little more straightforward, but then Liberty or Death has its own sort of separate combat system. It's different than everything else too. Um, so Fire in the Lake also highly recommended. Great cover too, I gotta say. Next, Churchill, Mark Herman's Churchill, The Big Three Struggle for Peace. This is a game that has been somewhat divisive, and I think it is absolutely terrific. The victory could, and it's not difficult or complicated or any of that. It's pretty easy to play. It is a 3-position game, and I believe there are bots, and I found the bots to be extremely unsatisfying to play with. I think this is a very strong game with 3 people. If you got 2 people, play something else. But or solitaire. But yeah, as a 3-player game, this is great. Now there's a tournament scenario in here that I strongly recommend over the campaign. I think the tournament scenario is 5 turns, the campaign scenario is 10 turns. If you really love it, you really want like a weekend long experience, play the campaign. But if otherwise, the tournament scenario is fine. I think this is a great game. I have played it not as much as I'd like, actually. And I've won it as all 3 factions too. The I think the thing that a lot of people there's kind of 2 things that people scratch their heads over here on Churchill. One is that it's my Mark's admission, it's not a war game. And 2 is the, as Holden Messerschmidt points out, is the sort of weird victory conditions that are fairly unconventional and are maybe the most Herman-esque mechanic in the box. In that if you there's a kind of a built-in fail-safe victory condition where you want to win by X number of points, but if you win by more than X number of points, then you lose because the other 2 powers will be assumed to be ganging up on you in the post-war world. That's very interesting dynamically. Some people have objected to that. I actually think it works really well. And I have, in fact, one of my wins as the Soviets ended up being because the British player, it was too easy for the British player, and they blew the game apart, and the Soviets and Americans ganged up on the British Empire at the end. So I think this is an absolutely terrific game. Next up is one that I have very, very nearly gotten rid of more than once. This is Pericles, the Peloponnesian War. Now, this is very different from the earlier Peloponnesian War in that this is a multiplayer game. Unlike Churchill, which is a 3-player game, this is, and I think there's bots in this too. This is a 4-player game where there were 2 Athenian players and 2 Spartan players, and they are in some dimensions of the game competing with other person on their team, and in other dimensions of the game teaming up to fight the other faction. It is dynamically super interesting, but I have bounced my one attempt to play it has resulted in me bouncing off of it fairly hard. I would really like to try this again at some point. As Meandering Mike points out, there is a war element in Churchill, but it is basically a series of tracks that a counter moves closer to Germany on along various tracks. It doesn't. That kind of makes it sound like states of siege, and it doesn't really work like that. But it's not a matter of when the Allies are going to win the war. It's just a matter of it's not a matter of if the Allies are going to win the war. It's a matter of when and who ends up on top militarily at when that happens. So, and Jason W says that Pericles is an amazing game. And yes, as Meandering Mike also says, war isn't the focus of Churchill, because the focus is the political interplay between the British, the Americans, and the Russians. And that's why it's interesting. That's the interesting thing about the game, not the war part. All right, next up is Fort Sumter. I have played this, but I have played the digital version, which I believe to be functionally identical to the board game version. It is a very easy game to play. It can be played in 30 minutes or so. I thought it was pretty cool, but I have not returned to it since my initial, say, 2 or 3 playthroughs of it. And I think that says more about me as a gamer than it does about the design, because I do know some people who have continued to play this, and it's been a design that's inspired a number of other designers. Remember that Fred Serval's Red Flag Over Paris is based on this. It's a bit different, but it's based on this, and there's another couple of things in the cooker that are also based on this Fort Sumter system. So this is going to be end up being a pretty influential game. This is a factor. I think Brian Jarvis says he's not familiar with the characters in the Pericles time frame. And that's boy, that'll help if you've read Thucydides. I mean, it'll really help. Or at least a good summary of the Peloponnesian War. I've seen Donald Kagan that has written one more recently than Thucydides. Everybody is more recent than Thucydides. I believe everybody loses should this happen, though, right? If it is not, if the axis is not finished off. So there is a cooperative element in, and this is one of the fascinating things about Churchill, is there's a cooperative element and a competitive element. Because you don't want to fuck the war up, right? That would be bad. Ugh, boy, I'd buy this. I want this Stigler. I want this all in one box. I want the entire peninsula on 7 maps, and I'll totally buy it. So next up is Gettysburg. This appeared originally in C3I issue number 32, and was later released by and it's an RBM studio. C3I is published by RBM Studios these days, and it is a game about the Battle of Gettysburg, and I've said it exactly that way for this exact reason. It doesn't cover the campaign. It covers Gettysburg. Okay, forces roll in. It's Meade versus Lee, and that's that. It is extremely chess-like. It was called by Mark intended to be an introductory war game, and I think it's actually pretty good at that. But it is extremely chess-like. For me, it was too chess-like. There are a fairly small number of pieces. The number of combat units on the map is something like 19, I think, total across both sides. That's really small. The scale for me created like a friction between what I wanted out of a Gettysburg experience and wasn't getting in this, just because of the scale. So I didn't feel like this one worked for me. This is, of the games on this list that I've played, that we've talked about, that I've had a slide for tonight, this is probably my least favorite. Is that correct? I think that's correct. I think it's a good game. I just didn't work for me, again, because of the scale. I felt like I wanted a different Gettysburg experience. I'd rather go buy one of the Avalon Hill Gettysburgs. On the other hand, in C3I number 33, this is the very next issue, we get Mark Herman's Waterloo campaign, which is basically the same system, except it's the Waterloo campaign, not Waterloo the battle. And to me, that made a huge difference. There are also a somewhat larger number of combat units floating around, but making this more a game about maneuver and initiative, and really, really, I think enabled this to shine. Where I didn't like Gettysburg, I do like this quite a bit. Now, one of the upcoming Mark Herman projects, and it's moving up rapidly in the food chain over at GMT, is Rebel Fury, and that is, I think, 4 or 5 Civil War battles using this system. But I believe, and I'll be disappointed to be corrected on this, that the scale more strongly resembles this Waterloo game than it does the Gettysburg game, because I feel like a more operational scale befits this system, and I think this system works really well at that scale. I thought it worked less well and was less interesting at the battle level. Very, very nice game. And I would buy Toloma. GCACW would be great. For the GBACW would be an empty box. But for GCACW, yeah, I'd be all over that. There was a somewhat official. I didn't put this in the news. I should have. So there was a post on social media from MMP about some stuff. I'll see if I can dig it up at the end of the show here. Next up is Versailles 1919. This is a co-design with Jeff Engelstein. This is also a very good game. This is part of the Great Statesman series, which started off with Churchill, continued with Pericles, and then the third volume is Versailles 1919. And I think it's a very interesting game. I feel like I haven't played it enough. It is a 4-player game, but plays better with less than the maximum number of players. You can get away with that in this. It's a game about the post-war world, shaping of the post-war world after World War One, and I found it very interesting. It does have the tarot-sized cards, which I think are frankly a pain in the ass, and I wish nobody would use them. But I mean, you can buy sleeves for them now, so I guess that's fine. But they're still a pain in the ass. But I think this is a very good game, and I did not find this difficult to get into or approach, unlike Pericles, where I just bounced off of it. Not bounced off because I think it's bad. Bounced off because I just wasn't getting it, and I really want to play it at some point. So here we come to the last entry in the list. This is Pacific War. What we have here in picture is the recent reprint from. Reprint is not fair. A new edition is correct. From MMP, from GMT. This is from the 1985 classic from Victory Games. This, and we've talked about this before, and we'll frankly talk about it again. But I think this is a magisterial game, and if there is a Mark Herman magnum opus, I think even if you think that one of the other games that we've talked about tonight, or one of the other Mark Herman games that we haven't talked about tonight, is his best game, I think this is still the magnum opus at the end. I didn't cover Plan Orange because it is kind of a sub game of Empire of the Sun, and we covered Empire of the Sun, and I left off all the other GBOH games for that same reason. All right, we do have MMP news here as well, so. All right, we'll get to that after we finish talking about Pacific War. The timing ought to be about right. So this is a unique and uniquely challenging game. It is a very difficult game to learn, even though it provides you with an on-ramp, right, with the engagement and battle and campaign scenarios. I don't think anybody's really going to have too much of a problem up to the point where you start getting into when you start getting deeper into the campaign scenarios. I'm not going to skip. I am skipping Mech War 2 because I didn't have anything to say about Mech War 2. So I think Mark is being gently pessimistic on that. I think there's more people that have played it through all the way. But I will say that if you bought Pacific War and you never play the campaign, don't worry. You can just play the strategic scenario, we say. If you just stick with the operational campaigns, you're going to be fine. That's really where the heart of this campaign is. This is extremely innovative and unique mechanically. It's got a unique telescoping movement system that I've never really seen anybody else try to do. It blends in intelligence. There's a shit ton of hidden information here. You could probably play it solitaire, but I think you're not getting the most out of it if you play it solitaire and anything other than the engagement scenarios, no problem solitaire. The battle scenarios, pretty much no problem solitaire. The campaign scenarios, if you play Coral Sea, you're probably okay doing that solitaire. But once you start getting into the bigger campaign scenarios, and there's really some guesswork as to where the enemy assets are. I think you're going to be missing a lot by with the lack of hidden information. Actually, didn't skip raid, but I couldn't skip raid because it's the first credited design. So Um, the yeah, I don't have anything to say about Mech War 2. It's not my favorite topic, and I never really looked at it closely at all. I know that some people liked it. It's considered a classic. I just didn't have anything to say anything to say about it. So yes, so this is really interesting. The map. A lot of people like turn their head sideways at the map. The map's a really strange projection, but it totally works. And the map is presented from the American perspective. You're looking across the Pacific into Asia. So, and that can be unnerving for the Japanese player. If you're going to get one of the two versions of the game, I'd strongly recommend the GMT one. The uh, Victory Games one's probably going pretty cheap now, but the increased handling efficiency is much better. Things that didn't improve that I would have preferred to improve were the off map test course displays. They're just too small. It's really kind of hard to juggle the placement of those counters in those tiny boxes. That said, this takes up even if you use the mini map rather than the two full size maps. This still is a very heavy consumer of table space. I did mention Sovereign of Discord earlier with the GMT update. This is I have this on order, so yeah, I'm totally. Um, so payroll, payroll. There's no payroll. There's no payroll here, and B, there's no payroll in decision either. There's no payroll. Um, the Frank, this is thanks for stopping by. So I think this is true. The so Frank says that Empire of the Sun is a more entertaining game, and Pacific War is a more informative guide for understanding the Pacific War. Empire of the Sun would not exist without the historical authority that Mark gained designing Pacific War. Everything that is said there is, I think, absolutely right. I think that it from like a fun to play standpoint, I think that Empire of the Sun is probably better. For a study of the topic, Pacific War is better. But part of that is the scale is completely different. The you know, Pacific War is really an operational game, and Empire of the Sun is not. Empire of the Sun consciously stays away from getting into the operational nitty gritty of of its topic. Pacific War goes right for that. So I think this is absolutely true, and I mean I think it's transparent that Mark gained so much knowledge about the topic designing Pacific War that he was then able to turn around and design a more straightforward and more approachable game in Empire of the Sun. It's not the world's most straightforward or approachable game, but it's certainly a lot easier to do than Pacific War. Now, the downsides to Pacific War, other than the displays are really, really tight, is really just the overall challenge of the game system. You really do have to dedicate yourself to it and put in a lot of time to understanding it and read the rules multiple times very closely. There have been a lot of rules questions that Mark has answered with "It's in the book," and Mark's right, it's in the book. But you had to read closely to get to that, and it's a huge book, right? So it's easy to miss. I have Asia Engulfed is, I believe, the game that's being talked about here. I don't have any opinion on that. It's supposed to be good. That in Europe Engulfed is supposed to be good. Nordic Maelstrom, Hitler's Last Gamble from 3W from 1989. 3M had been out of the games business for some time by 1989. So if you haven't watched it yet, please do watch the video interview that we did that I released on whatever earlier or over the weekend with John Butterfield and Danny Parker, the designer of Hitler's Last Gamble, which is coming out in a new edition from Compass. That sounds extremely promising, and I'm very excited to see it personally. I don't really feel like I need another Bulge game, but I need that one. So 3M. So 3M is the folks that they sold their board game line to Avalon Hill in like the mid or early 70s, I think. And shockingly, that is the same 3M that makes Scotch tape. For some reason, they decided they were getting into board games at one point. And some of the better known Avalon Hill non-war games did come from 3M originally. Acquire was one. Okay, so let's talk about the Multi-Man Publishing update. So I apologize for forgetting about this completely. So this was posted just about a week ago, so not too long after the last show. MMP is building at the time. They were building copies of Ardennes 2 and should start shipping them sometime this week. That should be now last week. They are still building copies of On to Richmond 2. I think that means copies for new orders and warehouse and retail, because I think all the pre-orders have gone out. ASL Starter Kit 3 expansion pack is in the warehouse, and I believe it is now available for order on Multi-Man's website. ASL Starter Kit number 1 will be back in stock very shortly. TCS Goose Green will go to the printer soon. Soon is the word that was used. BCS Valley of Tears. Half the counters are in the warehouse. The other half will arrive soon. They're still doing final proofing of some components, and are hoping that they can have this ready for the 50th anniversary of the Yom Kippur War, which one presumes would be October. OCS Crimea counters are due this week. They're still in pre-production for other components. They plan to have an ASLOC action pack, that's ASL Oktoberfest in October, ready for early October. This will be Action Pack 18, and there'll be a 30-day sale period and no pre-order. Work continues on GTS Utah. They want to have that ready to ship by the end of the year, along with the reprint of GTS The Devil's Cauldron. Now, The Devil's Cauldron is a terrific game that I highly recommend. So if you are interested in that, and it's expensive, but you get a lot of value in it too. It's going to be very difficult to get after it goes out of print again. Nordic Maelstrom, we did talk about Great Battles of Alexander Deluxe in the GMT update section. So I will refer you back to that. It should be coming fairly soon, though. All right. And there's a subsequent post. Skirmisher 4 for GCACW is being worked on. The next game for GCACW will be Thunder Along the Mississippi, which will be the Vicksburg game. The game after that, I have more information than Pete on this, I think, will be the new, whatever it's going to be called, the new Stonewall in the Valley, which will include Sheridan in the Valley as well. So you get both the 1862 and 1864 campaigns. Kevin Featherly asks, do I think that On to Richmond 2 will be sold out by Christmas? I doubt it. I think you probably have till about the end of the year. I think you're taking there's a bit of risk here. You buy yourself an early Christmas present. Let me put it that way. All right, BCS. All we're doing here is we're referring to Carl Fung's blog on this, which is on BGG. I'm not going to go look at that right now. SCS, there's a game on Third Kharkov in the works. TCS, there are games in the hopper where they're looking at to continue the system after Goose Green, but they're not ready to announce anything. There was talk about a small Vietnam battles game, which I'd be interested in that. I will buy whatever they decide to do for GCS at this point. So, Line of Battle, Dean is working on No Turning Back, which is the Battle of the Wilderness, and is hoping to have it ready to submit for pre-order by the end of the year. OCS Luzon game will appear in a new OCS magazine. The counters are done. The map is close. The rules or charts need a final review, and I don't know what the status of the magazine is. That's been known to hold this kind of thing up before. There's a number of products that were discussed, but they don't have really any real information on them yet. Future special ops issues, reprints of the ASL rules binder. I wouldn't hold my breath till I turn purple on that at this point. The new Panzerblitz by Sharon Boyd, that actually looks interesting, and I'm wondering where it is. And a variety of ASL things, including Polish Eagles, the reprint of Doom Battalions, and Twilight of the Reich, which I believe is Berlin 45 in ASL. So, and then the last update was from like today. New product, and I'll put a link in. I'll put this link in. Shit. Hold on. I'll put this link in the chat. This is a link to ASL Starter Kit Expansion Pack number 3. So, Nordic Maelstrom. I haven't actually done anything with Target for today, but it is basically B-17 Queen of the Skies on steroids and not limited to B-17. To the actual planes B-17s. There's like 4 or 6 or something like that, different bombers that you can fly in it. So it's actually really neat, and it's considerably more detailed, and does have, I think, a little more decision making in it than B-17 Queen of the Skies. But be prepared that's the kind of game that it is. So it might have come out that way. That's plausible. So, folks, it is 10:01. So let's talk about what we have coming up this week. Video production has not been going great. So, because of a variety of things, including but not limited to COVID. But I do have an unboxing video this week that is a item from Avalanche Press, who were kind enough to send me some stuff. So check that out. That's Coral Sea. And I do have, if anybody would be interested in seeing, I don't know. I thought about doing an AMA. And I also thought about like wait until I hit 10,000 subscribers to do that, which could happen as soon as sometime in 2024 if I actually got off my ass and made more videos. Next on the 3D printing front, oh geez, I don't have it with me. I have these. So you may have seen those little paper dividers that go in the GMT counter trays. Well, I'm 3D printing them. So this is V1. This is V1. We're on V4. Fortunately, a V only takes about 25 minutes to print on this. And I'm pretty sure V4 is going to be the right one. This is just a matter of getting the size quite right because the interior of these compartments is hard to measure. So there'll be versions with 2 compartments, 3 compartments, and 6 compartments. And yeah, so this was kind of the thing. This is we kind of do this, but I mean, I don't know. People might ask different questions. Who knows? I don't know. This is why I was like, I don't know. This might be dumb. Frank says he doesn't recall designing Red. I say, well, all I can do is say that's what Board Game Geek says. So if Board Game Geek is wrong, it wouldn't be the first time. So this is plausible. I haven't. This is a great idea, actually, and maybe I should put this in the guide. This is actually a really good idea. It's a very good idea. I think this is a very good idea. Which trays exactly got used to do this? So I will be printing some more of these tomorrow because we're doing. One of the next things in the queue is World at War, and that's going to take. It sounds like it's going to take 10 trays, 10 S24 trays. And I'm still printing them. So I think the last so the mechanical approach is extremely similar to the Hunters and the Hunted, in that those are also the inheritors of B-17 Queen of the Skies. So I should get to this. Also, I've got this is not the whole thing. So based on a conversation with Alexander over at the Players Aid on Twitter, or whatever the fuck it's called now, I designed this sort of card sling that would kind of nestle the cards. This is one of the incomplete ones that didn't come out quite right. So this is actually needs to go in the wastebasket. So the cards kind of sit because sleeve cards, if you have a big stack of sleeve cards, they'll kind of slide all over the place. So they kind of rest in here. So I call this the deck sling, and this model will be available in 2 different sizes. And the 1st of September or the last day of August. It's likely to be August 30th, because on the 31st I'm going to be busy. So yes, the bell bottom solution. This is exactly right. So I did get it done. I did come up with this design after I think five. I think the fourth or fifth one was the one I ended up going with. And I was pretty happy with it. So yeah, if you like the hunters, then I think a target for today and target for tonight are totally worth your time. So anyway, unboxing later this week. We'll have a show with Dan. I don't know if we have a guest lined up yet or not. I got to talk to Dan about that. We have a couple of very exciting guests coming up, but none of them this week. So I apologize to our future guest for Thursday for saying that they are not exciting, but I'm sure they will be very exciting. Just I don't know who they are yet, so they might be not exciting. It might be me and Dan. Worst case. So, Jeff, if you are going to buy, that's the deluxe one. That's the big plastic breakable one. That's not the one I recommend. And it also, if you're going to only buy one, unless you know you're going to stick to half-inch counters, I would probably get the 2.5 millimeter. You may, if you can't get them from, if you found that on Amazon, which I take it you did, you could just go to Oregon Laminations and order directly from them. They may have a better selection of that as well. Yeah, Pacific Chase, new Jeremy White game, popped up on tables and was played by a bunch of people at the San Diego thing in Rhode Island. And some folks are saying they like it better than Atlantic Chase. So it does. It looks promising. I'm very curious to see what the whereabouts of Schrodinger's Convoy turn out to be. So everybody have a great night. We will be back on Thursday with Dan the Dancing Man. And otherwise, we'll be back next week with a new topic. Everybody have a great night.